was probably the most important thing that I've found when dealing with people in businesses. You want to be generous. You want to be generous with your time. You want to be generous with your money at times when possible. You want to be generous with your skills. You want to be generous with everything, because if people see that you're willing to go to bat for them, and you're willing to step up, whether it's employees or customers or contractors or whatever, most of those people will reciprocate.
What's up, everybody? It's Tre Tipton, and welcome to Tre'd Talk. If you didn't know, now you know, and if you're new, tell someone that doesn't know. Welcome to Tre'd Talk once again, man. I'm with an incredible guest, my man Steve Devlin. Ladies and gentlemen, round of applause, please. Round of applause, please. And this guy here is a man of multiple trades. And the reason why I say that is because naturally you're a painter at heart, right? Mm-hmm. But that's not how you started, correct?
No, not at all.
So tell everybody a little bit about where you started and how did you get to the painting realm and being the contractor you are right now.
So whenever I was about 22, 23, I just finished my undergrad, and this was 2012, so the financial crisis was kind of still reverberating from 2008, and you didn't really have a lot of employment options with just a bachelor's degree at the time. So I started working for this older gentleman who owned an apartment building. And what I did was essentially anything that he told me to do there maintenance-wise. And a lot of it was painting, repainting the units, the hallways, garage doors, pretty much anything that needed done. He gave me the opportunity at that job to do it. And I learned a lot of just sort of on-the-job training there, and painting just happened to be the thing that I did the most of. And that was between my time of undergrad and graduate school. And eventually I went to graduate school and graduated, and I got a job working somewhat in the field that I'd studied, but the company laid me off. Wow. So I kind of fell back on that knowledge that I had gained working for that older gentleman. And before I had started my own company, I was working for a concrete contractor, hauling wheelbarrows of cement, for like 4 or 5 hours a day. And this gentleman had been in the union for 20 years.
Wow.
And
so he was paid.
Yeah, but what kind of was the impetus for me to start the business was he had kind of maxed out what he was going to make in that particular institution. And at the age of like 45, he decided to start his own business. And he was relatively successful with it, despite starting it later in his life. And I was at that point in my life where I really wasn't sure if I was going to go back to what I had studied in school and try to pursue that or do something else. And on a whim, he just said, well, you know how to paint, right? I said, yeah. And he said, well, why don't you just start your own business? And then he gave me a $400 loan to start. My very first job was painting his house. And yeah.
Now we're here.
So
what was your degree in, so everybody can know exactly where you started at?
My undergraduate degree, I went to the University of Pittsburgh for my undergrad and grad.
H2P?
Yeah.
I love to hear it. At least it's not Penn State.
No,
Here we go.
No. And my undergraduate was political science, and this is a subject matter that I enjoyed. It was something that interested me. And my graduate degree was I went to the Graduate School for International and Public Affairs. So my focus, or my actual degree, was a master's in International and Public Affairs, but my major was International Political Economy, so essentially international politics and economics.
So you're a politician who paints.
Somebody who maybe knows a whole lot about politics and economics who paints, yeah. But that's I like the material. I applied for the program. I got in. I did pretty well. But a lot of people who go into that field, they tend to do work in think tanks, public policy research, local governments, things like that. And that would have required moving. And that was at a point in my life where I didn't want to do that.
Right.
So falling into the contractor thing was definitely, I had prior knowledge of the work, definitely not the business.
Right.
That was something that I'm still learning to this day and probably will never stop learning about. Right. But that small amount of knowledge that I gained through working for that guy, and I would argue that the motivation that you need to get through a graduate school or graduate program and be successful at it, those two things coming together, I think, helped me get started in the business and make it moderately successful up until this point.
So what do you love most about your current business? Because I know right now as a painter, there's a lot of details, right? Like you got to be somewhat detailed as well as detailed, but you got to be smart about the things that you're doing. So How does that play a role for you?
Especially when you're starting out, you will almost take any job that comes your way because you want to, you need it. You know what I mean? You want to start making money and you want to start to really dive into the subject matter and the work. I had an old professor who had this phrase that I never forgot, and it was know your limits and boundaries. And I think that's very important for people starting out with, like I did, with sort of a baseline knowledge of the trade, but hardly any knowledge of the business end of things. So don't be afraid to start small and don't feel like you're not doing enough if you do that. You need to take into account the positive versus the negatives of making a decision early on in a business. And that can be a very hard thing to do because you don't have any perspective.
Right.
Everything is a new decision that you're making. But the thing that I enjoy about the business is, I think there's two primary things that drew me to it. One is making it for yourself. That's an incredibly rewarding and successful feeling where you can provide somebody with a good or a service, they're satisfied with it, and they pay you.
Right.
That's a very unique feeling that takes a lot of dedication and hard work to make happen and make happen consistently. The other part of it that I enjoy the job is you get to see the results of your work.
Right.
You get to go into a space that is damaged or somebody wants to change it, and at the end of the day, you get to see the results of your work and you get to see how happy the customer is.
Right.
That's an incredibly rewarding feeling that I think comes from contract work in general, because you get to make something better, you get to improve something, you get to build something.
You can physically, tangibly see it, right?
Precisely.
And what's crazy is, what y'all don't know is the wall behind me is done by my man Steve. So if you like what you see, call my man right now.
Yep.
I'm going to have him give you everything.
Paintingandnat.com.
Come on.
Instagram, Painting and Nat. That's painting, the word painting, and apostrophe A-A-T. Yeah.
Come on. Go get yourself painted up. You know what I mean? But ultimately, man, so how many employees do you have?
So right now I have 2 permanent people, and for larger jobs, I have a couple part-time people that I can call in, temporary people. And at one time I had 3 or 4, then a couple part-time, and then I had 3. Now I have 2 and more part-time. In the contracting business, employment can fluctuate.
Right.
Yeah, it's definitely not what you call stable.
So would you say, like, sometimes, and now we're gonna get a little bit deep here, because I like to get deep. That's what they know me as, the guy that gets deep, right?
Get deep.
So with that said, man, like, how frustrating can that be, not only as a boss, because you know that you have other people's lives in your hands, right? So you're constantly trying to look for jobs, trying to take care of your people. But even for yourself, man, like, how much of a toll has that taken upon you and your mental health, but as well as some of your employees that you might have seen?
You definitely have to have, as a business owner and employer, you have to have a pretty strong constitution, and you need to be able to keep your composure when issues arise with employees, because inevitably they will. They're other human beings, and when we interact with them, sometimes the interactions don't go the way that we want to.
Right.
I'll give you an example. Last summer, I was the busiest that I had been, and my number one guy, my top guy, who was with me the longest, who had been my first serious long-term employee, ran into a couple financial speed bumps to where he needed to look for something that paid him more.
Right.
And, he just came right out and said, hey, I got to go, do something else. And that was a big blow, because that was the busiest time of the year for me. I just picked up 2 commercial jobs,
Wow.
the two biggest jobs that I got that year. And my best guy was gone. So that was a sort of a hurdle that I had not faced up until that point in my business. I hadn't had somebody that essential to me leave. And I just kept having to remind myself, I did this for a while by myself. I got some help. I made it through. I found him things were good. But that's the reality you're going to have to face if you run a business.
Right.
Nobody's going to be with you forever, for forever. And whatever reasons they have to go, man, they have to go.
Right.
You can obviously try to offer them more. You can try to get them to stay. But ultimately, it's going to be their decision.
Right.
And I think it's just because it only really happened to me one time, and I was able to recover from it pretty well. I don't really have any tactics or strategies to offer in that respect, but rather than you have to keep a positive attitude about that's not going to be the end of you.
Right.
That's just something that happens when you run a business.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you find yourself in a space right now where you're looking to grow the company with employees and more people?
Yeah. Every year I set goals for myself when it comes to how much I want to have put away at the end of the year, potentially bring on another employee. And it's important in any business to have those types of goals, because if you don't, you'll stagnate and you won't grow. the contracting business, at least from my very limited experience and in my perspective, is that your ability to grow depends upon the volume of work that you're going to get. Because, I mean, and like, yeah, duh, that kind of makes sense from any business perspective. But it's very difficult to keep a few employees busy with the limited work that, say, I would get at this stage in my business development. But if I would get more business, that means I would have to find more employees in order to like tackle that problem. And like I said, employment in the contracting industry can be, very precarious at times,
And that's something, bro, I can imagine being very difficult for you, man, because as the times go on, man, we live in Pittsburgh, right? So I guarantee there's probably a lot of jobs that you would typically do outside that you're not doing right now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then on top of that, the ones that you do get indoors are probably really nice.
Yeah.
But in the same sense, it goes back to that being of you never know when the job's coming.
Yeah, I mean, the trades, especially in a city like Pittsburgh, because it's very weather dependent, our business cycle, that's exactly what it is. It's a cycle, it's cyclical. You're going to be busy in the summertime, going into the fall, and then you're going to slow down right around the holidays. And, that's from somebody who may be listening to this thinking about starting a small business, you have to start putting your money away in April.
Oh.
And because by the time you get to winter, you might get a patch where you don't work for 2 months, or you get small jobs, and rather than you doing those and taking the money, well, you got to put your people on that because they have an expectation of being paid. So you might make nothing, but your employees still make money, and they'll remain your employees because, you sacrificed in that moment. So, if your work is weather dependent, the minute you start making money in the spring, you need to take a portion of that and put it away.
So let's talk about that, and let's talk about sacrifice, right?
Yeah.
Because ultimately, as a leader, as an owner, there's multiple sacrifices that you have to take on a day-to-day basis, right? So you don't got to say any amazing names or anything crazy, but tell the people about a sacrifice that you've had to make as a business owner in order for your employees to eat.
So, one thing I will say, to preface that, it's very important for anybody who wants to start a business to understand what an operating budget is and how important that is. There were weeks in around October, around Thanksgiving, where we just didn't have work that week. And I could tell my employees, hey, we don't have work this week. You're not getting paid this week. But I didn't. I took that money out of the operating budget and I paid them their full weekly paychecks that week, even though we didn't work, because I know they have financial expectations, and it's my responsibility to provide them with that. If I can't provide them with the work to do it, I feel that as a business owner, as a leader, as a boss, you need to show those people that you appreciate all the work they've done up until that point and pay them.
And that's huge, bro, because you don't meet a lot of leaders like that.
Well, some people, like you would say, that's the closest thing I could think to like a sacrifice, thinking in tangible terms like money in that respect. But I think that's what a leader does. They step up when they have to, and they show people that, hey, I wouldn't be able to step up for you if you didn't help me in the first place. Right. So I'm paying you back.
Right, and because you're going out of your way to help me, I feel obligated to go out of my way to help you.
Exactly. I mean, and I always, at the end of the day, especially when we have a hard day, I always thank everybody before we leave. I say, you guys did a good job today. Like we made the progress that we want to make. I always want to make sure that they feel appreciated at the end of the day.
Right. And I'm guaranteed that goes a long way, man. When you show appreciation to the people who are giving to you, they always want to give back tenfold, right? So with that said, man, I see that you move around a lot. You do a lot of different business. What was the one key thing that you had to learn as a business owner that you could say that you didn't know prior to that?
I think the one thing you have to be as a business owner, especially a boss and somebody who's going to be working alongside your employees, and not only that, but providing for them. I feel almost in this country, like, and in our modern society, greed is almost held up as virtuous, and that it's good to have more and want more. But what I've found, that what I didn't realize, or was probably the most important thing that I've found when dealing with people and businesses, you want to be generous. You want to be generous with your time. You want to be generous with your money at times when possible. You want to be generous with your skills. You want to be generous with everything, because if people see that you're willing to go to bat for them and you're willing to step up, whether it's employees or customers or contractors or whatever, most of those people will reciprocate. Right. Yeah, occasionally you'll get those people, you do enough business, you'll get unscrupulous people just will take advantage of your good nature, but you do enough business, like, that's just inevitable. You're going to run into people like that. But I felt that what I learned was that being generous with your time, being generous with your attention, with your praise, it comes back to you tenfold when dealing with people.
So you obviously have a strong sense of hard work. I mean, it's without question. You can see it, right?
Thank you.
So with that said, man, where does that come from? Is that something that you learned from your dad, your mom, your grandfather, your grandmother?
But I was, the older I get, the more incredibly fortunate that I realized how incredibly fortunate I was to have the support system that I did when I was growing up.
Talk to me.
But my mother and my father were both hardworking people. They didn't have what you call like high earning professions. My dad was a social worker and my mother was a nurse.
Whoa, so your dad was a social worker.
And so they grew, or when I grew up, I saw them doing jobs that provided people a service, that they help people.
Right.
That, you know, like being in the nursing profession and being in the social work profession, particularly on the mental health side. So I had a very, very unique perspective on that growing up. My mother's parents were hardworking people. My grandfather was a salesman. My dad's parents were hardworking people. He worked, you know, blue-collar jobs his whole life.
It's in your blood.
But if I had to credit one person with my work ethic, it's my father, hands down, because he would just not allow me to quit when I was a kid at anything. He made me finish things. He made me do hard things. And as a result of that, I think now that I'm older and I can look back on it, kids are full of a lot of things, but they're full of excuses. And they will give you any excuse that they can muster in order not to do something. But if you push a kid past that urge to make something up as to why they can't do something, and you show them that they actually can, that messes with your head. That actually implants something in you that tells you that, hey, if I put in the time and I put in the thought and the focus, almost anything is achievable.
Anything.
Yeah, in that sense. And that's not just some like life coach spiritual like nonsense. I mean, it's the result of focus, conscientiousness, hard work, and dedication. And like those aren't just buzzwords. Those are things that you have to beat into your head and into your soul in order to benefit from them.
And there's many days where you don't feel that. You know what I mean? There's more days than not that you feel unmotivated.
Yeah,
and you do motivated.
Particularly, and sometimes the hardest days aren't even the ones where you just don't feel like doing anything because you just know I don't feel like doing anything. It's the days where you have to make yourself do those things. And you have a little bit of motivation, but you need to hit the throttle. That can be difficult.
So give the viewers a little bit of something, man. I want to know this, man. When's the time personally when you felt like you were ready to quit and you powered through and it ended up being the best thing for you?
So I was doing this job for this guy who was very, very wealthy, massive house, massive driveway. I got a job to clean it and seal the concrete. I'd done it before. It wasn't something that it was like brand new. And I go there, I clean it. I start putting the concrete sealer on there. But what I didn't realize was the temperature has to be within a certain range for you to apply this sealant. And I ended up messing up this guy's roughly like 150 square foot driveway.
Sheesh.
And the materials on that, if I hadn't have been able to, long story short, I screwed up the materials on that and I screwed up the job and I didn't know how to fix it. I was effectively bankrupt at that point. It was like less than a year into my business, and this particular sealant was very expensive, thousands of dollars, and I screwed it up. I tanked it. And I remember sitting in my truck at home waiting to go in to figure out what I was going to do, just sitting there going, you know, maybe it's time to get out of this. Like, maybe this isn't for me. And then I went in, I sort of composed myself, laid down, took a nap, woke up an hour later, and then, you know, I ended up solving the problem and working it out with the guy. But that was one of those moments where really, really early on, if you take a hit like that and you see zero in your bank account and you still owe people money, that's something that you either get over it or you don't.
Oh, man. You know what I call those moments? I call them Rocky moments.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because in that moment, man, you got to be Stallone. You know what I'm saying? You got to get ready to get on up from that beat down.
You got to go, I guess, to Apollo Creed and say,
you know what I mean?
Coming. Yeah.
Keep coming. Because there's a lot of times in life, man, when we sit down and we're like, yeah, I don't want to do this no more. I'm cool. I'm done. I can't find a way to get out of this, right? And then you stop yourself and you pause and you realize, you're like, wait a minute. This is not the worst thing I've been through.
No.
This is not the worst I've been down. I just got to find a new solution. You know what I mean? And in those moments, let you know right then and there, am I a fighter or am I a quitter, right? Because in that moment, had your dad not instilled all those things in you, most people would have quit.
It would have been the likelihood or the percentage of me giving up versus not giving up would have probably tipped the scales.
100%.
Yeah.
Because without question, man, when certain things like that happen, especially when it comes to money, people don't know how to act and people don't know how to react, right? Because life is not about how things happen to you. It's about how you react to them. You know what I mean? So when you're reacting and you realize, like, wait a minute, okay, slow down. Let me take me out of it, right? Let me take me out of it. Let me look at the whole picture of what's going on right now. Because 9 times out of 10, you're going to come up with a solution that's going to be figured out, right? And it's going to be worked out. But the best part about it is that there's going to be somebody else out there that's going to have that problem 10 times more, right?
That's true, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's important to keep that kind of relativity, like that idea of that, okay, you know, this might be bad for me, but it's a problem that can be solved. I remember my dad always saying, like, every problem has a solution.
Come on.
You know what I mean?
Come on.
And that's just a simple phrase like that when you're in a rough spot, just to remind yourself to, you know, take a deep breath and say, okay, I may not know it, but there is a solution to this problem.
You know what's crazy about the solution, though? The solution sometimes can be very, very harsh.
It can.
You know what I mean? Like, sometimes the solution is like, man, I really have to make this decision.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And go ahead.
No, it's that simple.
Yeah, and I think that's I guess going back to like the childhood thing, I think that's why it's important for kids to experience hard things, to be deprived of certain things, to understand that it's not always going to be your way, and when it's not, you just have to learn how to deal with that feeling and move past it.
Right.
Because if you don't get that experience in your younger and your formative years, you develop into an adult who can't take criticism, who can't assess their problems and be honest with themselves about how to get past them.
Right.
You know?
Especially, you got to think, man, a lot of young kids nowadays, they think that at some point in time in your life, you say, oh, I'm an adult. I'll tell you this right now. You'll go through life and be like, wait a minute, I'm 28. Wait a minute, I'm 35. Wait a minute, I'm 40.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, and it's a blink of an eye. And I used to hear that all the time, bro. I'm like, bro, like, you're lying. Life don't go by that fast. No, it really does go by that fast.
And especially when you get past all of the years where people will kind of make excuses for wherever you're at in life. Like, you know, if you're like 20, you're 25 and you don't have it together yet, everybody's like, all right, well, he's 25.
Right.
You know, like, but when you get to 30 and somebody looks at you and be like, what have you been doing the past 10 years? Or worse yet, 40.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And I think that just reiterates like what you were saying. Absolutely.
And that's the thing, man. I feel like that's a fear that a lot of us also live with, right? So it allows us to forget to take care of ourselves sometimes because we overwork ourselves.
Yeah.
That is something that I feel like Americans do to the utmost, sometimes too much, is that we overwork ourselves to the point where we're ready to quit. And that's the primary thing that I try to talk on Tre'd Talk is take care of you, right? And and this is my question to you now is, how are you taking care of you in this current state of mind, being the new boss that you are?
That's a good, very, very good point, and that's an interesting perspective because being in the trades, I see a few different generations of tradesmen. Like, I'm a millennial. I was born in 1990.
Okay.
So I'm working with Gen Xers and I'm working with baby boomers. And the baby boomer generation, more so than any generation, worked themselves to death. Most of them had terrible habits. I mean, anybody who's worked in the contracting trades knows that most people drink, most people use drugs. You know what I mean? It's just it's normal in that field. And I watched a lot of those people of those differing generations do things that over time just absolutely wreck them in addition to the work they were doing. So I made a concerted point or an effort myself about 5 years ago at this point to like go to a gym 3-4 days a week and work out.
Right.
To learn a little bit more about nutrition because when I was in college, you know, I ate
Everything.
like garbage like everybody
everything.
else does. And I started to see, you know, kind of when you get to your mid-20s, you know, the people you went to high school with and people that you know, that's when you start to see real kind of physical change, you know, in people based on the decisions that they made. So I recognized that if I wanted to do this job, if I wanted to continue to do this trade and be, you know, a responsible, competent person that can get the job done, but not only run a business, you have to be healthy.
Right.
You have to keep yourself in relatively good shape.
Right.
Otherwise, you're just not going to have the energy and the motivation to take care of what you need to take care of.
And that's the thing, man. You find people often not taking care of themselves because they get into a routine, right?
They just work all the time.
They work themselves to death, man.
Yeah, that's one thing that we were talking about before the show when it comes to working hours in a day for my business. I found that most of the time you're going to get maximum efficiency out of somebody at about 6 hours, 6.5 hours. And then after that, the last 2 hours of the day, they're just, you know, watching the clock, waiting to go home.
Right.
And I found that if you really work hard for those 6.5 hours, you take a small break to get something to eat, you're going to get more done
Right.
from the people working for you than trying to push somebody past, you know, their limit.
So where do you think as a leader that you need to grow more in order for you to help out your employees, but also help out yourself?
I'm still in the sort of opening stages of my business, so a lot of the time right now, my employees are like 1099,
Okay.
and I'm working right now to, take that next step in the business to make sure that they get health insurance and workers' comp and all that. And I know that seems kind of like basic, for a business owner, but from anybody who wants thinking about starting a business, you're not going to be able to do that right away.
Right.
So that's kind of the option that you have. One thing I haven't done and I want to do is at the end of this year. I know obviously supervisors will evaluate their employees, but I want to sit each person down who worked for me a significant amount of time this year and ask them point blank, evaluate me as a boss. What can I do better?
Wow.
Am I deficient in anything? Is there something I could have done to make this easier? Or I ask for input in my employees all the time on jobs. When we're all looking at something that we've all done before, even though I'm the boss, they have experience in it too.
Right.
And maybe they saw something I didn't, or maybe they did it in a way that was different than I did it and was better. I'll always ask them, what do you think about this? How do you think we should approach this?
Right. You're not a dictator. You're a teammate.
No, and I feel like I actually don't like the word boss. Like I don't like being called a boss, and I don't like calling my employees. I tend to call them associates or my teammates in that sense, because even though I'm the one who's getting the jobs and paying them, and in a traditional sense, I am a boss, yes, but like I'm more of a director. Right. When it comes to a paint job or any kind of contracting job, everybody has a role to play.
Right.
And you need to understand and work in consort with your other employees in order to make sure that puzzle comes together. Right. And simply I remember hearing this phrase, and it always stuck with me, is that, a boss in the field is more, or a leader in the field is more respected than a boss behind the desk.
Come on.
And I always want to be there with the people next to them, showing them that, even though I'm the one, who's signing your paychecks, I'm still doing the same work as you pretty much.
100%, man. And how I like to think about it is I consider Brian a captain, not a boss. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Because the captain's in the field with you.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? And taking on that role of, okay, you're going through hell, let me go through hell with you.
With you. I'm standing right next to you, yeah.
And that's not something that you see often, especially in major corporations. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So the fact that you're taking that upon yourself right now at such an early stage is huge, man. I'm pretty sure a lot of your employees in some sort are very, very grateful.
I hope so. And I mean, I'm grateful for them, because there's no way I could, I consider myself very fortunate for somebody at my age being able to do what I do. Right. And have the financial security that I have. And I would not be there if not for those people that were able to help me. I just wouldn't. It's impossible.
Right. And in beginning stages, I'm sure, bro, I'm a big believer in the fact that if somebody's not calling you crazy, then you're probably not doing the right thing. Right?
Yeah, and I get called a lot that by my employees. Yeah. I'm pretty calm now, but I'm a pretty high-strung individual when it comes to like the job, and I can be, kind of maybe overbearing at some points, not to where I'm mean or anything like that, but my employees are like, Steve, you need to like take a breath, like step back, go out in the hallway for a second, you know what I mean?
Because you want things to be done perfect, detailed.
Yeah, and because I'm always thinking, and this is just a good principle to adhere to when it comes to doing any kind of work. Do it like you're doing it for yourself or your mother or your father. Right. You know what I mean? If you're going to look at this and you're going to put your name on it, make it so when you do, you'd like to show it to somebody else.
Right. You don't want nothing to look bad with your name on it. You know what I mean?
That's why I was checking out this wall before I was going to sit behind it. Making sure I didn't mess up.
If y'all didn't see him, my man was checking this wall about 10 times, making sure it looked good. You feel me? He ain't got time to make sure it looked bad. But that's the thing, man. I want to say, one, again, I appreciate you as a leader just because from what you've said, man, you've genuinely taken the time to take care of your people, man. And that's not... You don't find that often in any space, to be honest with you, whether it be sports, whether it be regular job, whatever it may be, whatever the occupation may be, man. But the fact that you're taking time to take care is huge, man. So I want to commend you on that.
Thank you.
But then my next couple questions are goofy questions.
Sure.
Because I'm the type of guy, bro, I'm on one side of the spectrum or I'm on the other. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So let's start here. First off, I'm trying to get sponsored here.
By Capri Sun.
Capri Sun sponsor me. We're trying to get sponsored here. I am. I really am. I love Capri Suns. You might as well sponsor the kid. But I will say this, man. As a kid, everybody drank Capri Suns.
Yes.
What was your Capri Sun growing up? I gotta know.
Now that I think back on it, I think it was probably the Fruit Punch.
Fruit Punch be buzzing. I ain't gonna lie.
I think it was.
Fruit Punch is the great one. You know what I mean? And I ain't gonna lie to you. I'm a Pacific. I can't even say that right. Pacific cooler. Yeah, I'm that type of guy sometimes, but I did like the Fruit Punch a lot, man. The Fruit Punch was just the one that it was a go-to. It was the original.
Yep.
Let's get in. Let's get out. Let's get going. So with that said, right. When I used to drink my Capri Suns, I had cartoons on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yep. So, like, what cartoon did you grow up watching?
Dude, I was a Nick kid.
Uh-oh.
Though, put a caveat there. there were a few Comedy Central or Cartoon Network shows that I did watch.
Okay, tell me your Cartoon Network show.
Dexter's Lab, Freakazoid.
Okay.
Ed, Ed, and Eddie.
I love Ed, Ed, and Eddie.
What else was on there?
Ed, and Eddie.
Those might have been the Cartoon Network ones, but on Nick, my hands down favorite show, like cartoon growing up, was Rocko's Modern Life.
Oh
yeah,
man,
that was it. And then I liked it came on a little bit later, more I was like when I was 10, 11 years old, but there was a cartoon called Invader Zim.
Invader Zim was so dark.
Dude, I know. Like all that, Johan Vasquez, I think, was the writer and the producer for that, but all his stuff is pretty weird. But man, that was just I like the X-Files. I like stuff like that.
I got you.
The alien vibe, but like really did it for me as a kid. Yeah.
It made sense.
Yeah.
You know what cartoon was it? It was Courage the Cowardly Dog.
Yeah, I like that one too. Yeah. That was pretty twisted.
Listen, when I go back and look at some of these TV shows, and I don't know about you, audience, but you go back and watch some of these TV shows that you watched as a kid, they weren't really for kids.
No, like SpongeBob had a lot of adult themes.
You know what I'm saying? Like I go back and I watch some of them, I'm like, yo, what's going on here?
I
Like,
know, right? Yeah.
Like, what was you trying to tell me as a kid? Like, I
Yeah.
wasn't understanding.
It's like Mr. Krabs is actually a real guy. He's most people's boss.
You know what I'm saying? Like, what is going on here? But I will say this, man. It's been a crazy, incredible time with you here on Tre'd Talk, man.
Thanks,
and I want to say thank you for coming on this
Thanks
show
for inviting me.
and enjoying the show. Did you have a good time?
I had an excellent time.
Okay, I love that.
You made it easy.
I try to, man. I try to make it fun. You know what I mean?
And thank you for all the people behind the scenes too.
So if you had anything, okay, anything at all that you would want to tell somebody out there that is a new beginning, newbie to building a business, what is some word of advice that you would give them right now?
Don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to take risks, because if you don't, you'll never get anywhere. And sometimes you might mess up more times than you're successful in the beginning. But if you have the dedication and the motivation to keep pushing past that, and most importantly, you actually learn from the mistakes that you're making. That's a really important part. You may not get where you think you may not get to where you think you should be, but you're going to get somewhere that is going to reward you and be appreciated by.
I love that, man. That's a great message for the world, man. So once again, this is Tre'd Talk. I'm your host. We're here with my man, Steve Devlin, man. We appreciate everything that you do. With that said, man, if you're watching, like, share, subscribe. Please follow us on Instagram. Tell them where they can find you one more time, Steve.
That's paintingandat.com, paintingandat on Instagram. That's painting_at.com.
You know where to find them. Go find them. If you need your house painted, you need your driveway helped out, just figure it out.
We do it all.
They do it all. Go get your man Steve and go get him right. You feel me? This is Tre'd Talk. I'm your host. Enjoy your day. We out of here.